Thanks so much. Here with our NBA insider Ian Begley after the Knicks close out the month of January with a 30-point victory over the Portland Trail Blazers. And after the game, Mike Brown said how pleased he is with his defense during this stretch. Ian, what's been different?
You know, I think Mike Brown has talked about the adjustments that he was able to make in some practice sessions earlier this week. The Knicks had 2 days off, played a game, had another 2 days off. That gave them a rare opportunity to have full practices. You don't see that often in the middle of an NBA season. Brown said he was able to put in some adjustments. He's not sharing details, but I think some of it has to do with pick and roll coverage. Jalen Brunson said afterward that it's attention to detail, and they're connected on that end of the floor in the way they definitely were not in that 2-9 stretch. So big difference here for this Knicks team.
Karl-Anthony Towns, back-to-back games with 20 rebounds. What impression do you think he's leaving with his teammates?
I think there's an appreciation in that locker room and from Mike Brown, because Karl-Anthony Towns didn't take a ton of shots against the Blazers. He hasn't shot a great percentage of late, but he's finding a way to impact the game. And he's not getting cheap rebounds. He's using his body. He's in traffic. He's getting important rebounds, offensive rebounds. So between that and the way that he can pass the ball, he is finding ways to impact winning, even when the shot's not falling.
Well, we got to talk about the trade deadline. 3 games left until that deadline. What's the latest?
It's interesting, Michelle. I think things are kind of gummed up right now because of the Giannis and Antetokounmpo situation. Teams who are interested in Giannis, and even teams who might be a third team facilitating a Giannis trade, they're just waiting it out because they're not going to do anything until the situation in Milwaukee is settled. So I think it's slowed down a bit because of that. Nothing really new on the Knicks front. They'd love to be in on Giannis. They're on the outside looking in, and also Jose Alvarado, Yves Missi down in New Orleans. But it was interesting. Mike Brown said that his guys have a bunker mentality. He said they have that all year, but particularly now with all the noise around the trade deadline, he said they're kind of sticking to themselves and trying to tune it out.
Yeah, they really don't seem to be bothered by it at all. Next up for the Knicks, they host LeBron James and the Lakers here at the Garden on Sunday. For Ian Begley, I'm Michelle Margaux.
Marc Malusis joins us now to discuss the Knicks. Marc, that's 5 straight wins, including beating the Sixers and the Raptors, in control most of the night against the Blazers. Have you seen enough to prove that the Knicks are back to being the dominant team they were earlier in the season?
Offensively, yeah. I mean, Chelsea, you look at it, they shot nearly 50% from the floor. They hit 19 threes, took a 45. This is an offensive team. That's what Mike Brown was brought here, right? So defensively, let's be honest, 3 of the 5 opponents during this 5-game winning streak aren't particularly good. You throw Brooklyn in the mix, Sacramento. Obviously, you look at the Portland Trail Blazers. 2 of the victories were really good. So do I think this team has all of a sudden found itself to where they were back to when they won the NBA Cup? For sure. However, I think even when they won the NBA Cup, I don't think it was necessarily a championship team because the defense needs to continue to improve, and that's something that you heard Jalen and Josh talk about after the game.
They sure do. Jalen Brunson, though, passed the 10,000 career point milestone Friday. How would you put into perspective what he's meant to this team and this city during his time in New York?
Well, he's an instrument of change. But, I mean, you've had players come here that have been huge stars in other places, right? And then they become stars here in New York City. The thing about Jalen Brunson that's interesting is that when he was brought over here from the Dallas Mavericks, it was basically people ripped the deal. They didn't think he was particularly good. They didn't think he was necessarily worth the money that the Knicks gave him. And obviously, he came here and has changed everything. And certain players come to organizations. He wanted the heat, wanted the money, wanted to be a New York Knick, and wanted the pressure that came along with it, and has absolutely performed, has taken his game to another level. That's where you give Jalen Brunson a ton of credit, is that he wasn't celebrated by many when he came here, but he's taking advantage of that opportunity. He's been obviously utterly brilliant.
He's been phenomenal. The Knicks have 3 more games before Thursday's trade deadline. Lots of rumors still surrounding Giannis Antetokounmpo. How do you think these upcoming games will influence what they do at the deadline?
I think the Knicks are going to try and improve themselves. I do. I mean, Giannis would be a bird of a different feather. Let's be perfectly honest. And I don't know if necessarily word coming out of Milwaukee earlier today is that they're kind of fielding offers in terms of judging the marketplace, not necessarily taking offers, looking to kind of move Giannis Antetokounmpo. And we know that NBA trade deadline's coming up later on this week. However, when you look at it, are the Knicks going to be a player in it? Yes. Do the Knicks have enough draft capital potentially to go out there and get him? I think there are other teams that might be interested. I think the only way Giannis ends up being a Knick come NBA trade deadline is if Giannis comes out and says, the only place I want to go to and the only place I want to play is New York, and that's not Brooklyn, that is with the New York Knicks. Then I think Giannis Antetokounmpo ends up being a Knick, but I think that's more a case during the course of the summer than it is right now. As far as at the NBA trade deadline, listen, I give Leon Gross a ton of credit. Since he's taken over this organization, they were absolutely dysfunctional before that. Historically speaking, they were awful, right? Now you look at what Leon Rose, Worldwide West has been able to do. They've been really, really smart. So I think they're going to try and improve this team on kind of the periphery and trying to improve a little perimeter defense, maybe add a little bit of size to this team. I do think that. Do I think they're going to go out there and get the big fish that's sitting out there in the Greek Freak? I do not.
Do you think that the way that the Knicks are currently constructed, that they can go and win a championship this year?
No, I think
there's win the Eastern Conference.
Chelsea, I think there's one big issue. Here's the big issue that the New York Knicks have. The big issue is that your two best players, conceivably speaking, right? When you look at Jalen Brunson, he's clearly the best, and Karl Anthony Towns, they can't play on the court together defensively at the same time because then they're awful. I mean, they just can't do it, right? Towns is not a plus defender, and we know Jalen Brunson is not a plus defender. That's the big issue that Mike Brown, Leon Rose, everybody in that Knick organization has. Now, the question you have is, how do you go out there and resolve that issue? Can they get through the East? The East is wide open. Yes, the Knicks can get through the East. If Oklahoma City's sitting there in the the NBA Finals, gets through the West, do I think they're going to beat the Thunder? If the Thunder are completely healthy, no, I do not.